Happy Saturday and welcome to the NBA Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com is where it gets you ready for today's 4-game main slate. We got 2 games on the early slate, so we'll briefly talk about that. We got to kick off the show, Adam, talking about last night as, man, if you had Terrence Mann in your lineup, and last night's a prime example of how you got to use late swap to your advantage.
Yeah, for sure. Reggie Jackson obviously was who a lot of people swapped to, and he did well. He just didn't get to play during the blowout. But leaving not that you always want to like force it to happen, but if you can leave yourself, especially in like tiebreaker situations, just leave yourself flexibility for later in the night, because if you're behind, you want to swap to get ahead. But also whenever there's late news, obviously, if you can make your lineups with more information than you had at the beginning of the night, you're going to put yourself in a better position.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looking at who ended up doing well last night. Obviously, if you did not have Andre Drummond, you likely did not cash 75 points over on DraftKings. Of course, Kennard and Mann are really the benefactors of what happened with the Clippers and Lou Williams and Reggie Jackson not playing there. Quickly for New York, going on for 40 points. But, man, we had some duds last night, too.
Yeah, last night to me was like a really fun slate, because we've had so many slates where like guys can't really fail because they only have 8 or 9 guys on their team. It was kind of fun last night having concentrated ownership on some players that didn't do well. Jaylen Brown started off pretty well, but I think didn't play the fourth quarter in the blowout. If he did play, he just didn't score. So yeah, I mean that was one that as a tournament player, it's always nice on those slates because it opens the door to be able to win tournaments when 30% of the field has a 9K guy that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, like when I do my crunches and all of a sudden I'm seeing Cole Anthony come up way too much to my crunches, I know it's just not going to be a good night.
Yeah, it was to me. It's the slates where you have like all the shorthanded teams and all the good value. They're fun to sweat because like your team is just racking up points all night, but it's so hard to win on those slates because it's really hard for people to make bad lineups. It's kind of just like it's just like different variations of good. Whereas nights like last night, they're not always as much fun to sweat because you're watching guys, that aren't very good fantasy players in your lineup. But I think they're the easier nights to win at because there's more room for people to make mistakes. There's a little bit more game theory, I think, that goes into it, because you're still going to get concentrated ownership on guys just because projection systems, across the industry are similar and people use them and all that. But the chances of the popular plays failing is so much higher on slates like last night where you don't have a ton of great value. So I think they're more fun from like an actual money making standpoint.
Of course, we're here to break down tonight's slate. Of course, we got a ton of shows coming for you today. 1 hour from now, myself and Pete Rogers Jr. will get you ready for the UFC fight card, which starts at noon Eastern time today. Then at 1:30, we got the NFL Strategy Show. 2:30, NFL Deeper Dive. Then Live Before Lock right after that. Then 6:30 will be NBA Live Before Lock. And then right after NBA Live Before Lock, it will be the NFL Showdown show. So keep it locked here all day long to Awesemo.com. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on YouTube. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button as we go on throughout this show. Of course, you have an early slate and then our main slate. The early slate, we'll kind of briefly touch on these games. We got Houston, San Antonio, and Orlando and Brooklyn. Both these games, I think, we can tie into each other. We're waiting to see when Victor Oladipo takes his physical, then kind of everything will play out. I'm personally hoping this happens because I do want to see what does Brooklyn look like if Harden plays alongside Durant. We do know there is no Kyrie Irving today.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what everybody's waiting on. And I was saying to you before the show, before I realized Kyrie was out, but I was really hoping that all 3 of those guys would play today on a non-main slate just so I could see what happens before I have to try and guess at it for an actual slate. But out, obviously with 3 ball dominant guys playing alongside each other, it seems like they want to play alongside each other. So maybe it'll work out from an ego standpoint, but we'll have to see. But it's obviously going to be really weird to project there. And then also, somewhat related, you have Houston just being shorthanded still because of that trade. So it makes for, despite being a 2-game slate, there's a lot of information we're waiting on and a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, like if you go on to DraftKings, you'll notice that Karis LeVert is actually listed as a Rockets player. He's officially not a Pacer until Oladipo takes his physical, even though Victor Oladipo is listed on FanDuel as a part of the Rockets. With Brooklyn, I think the question is going to be is once all three of these guys come together, who's going to sacrifice the ball a little bit. But also, I got to look at someone like a Joe Harris, who I think could be a big benefactor there in Brooklyn, just because he's going to have a lot of great opportunities.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how it goes for him. He's someone that like at his current price, I think it'll be tough for him because he's priced up from the Nets playing so many shorthanded games recently. But he'll get good looks. And he's never been a really high usage guy anyway. He's like a 16, 17% usage guy. I assume that they'll start bringing him off the bench or keep bringing him off the bench like they were doing when the team was somewhat or semi-healthy before. So, yeah, I think he'll get a lot of good looks. It's just, he's clearly not going to get shot volume.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of, is there anything else on these two early games you want to mention before we kind of move on to the main slate?
I mean, the center position for Brooklyn is still really thin since Jared Allen's gone. Jordan, I would assume, still plays big minutes. For Houston, you have DeMarcus Cousins doubtful, in addition to them being without, Daniel House, John Wall, potentially Eric Gordon. So Eric Gordon's the big news there, but Cousins being doubtful should lead to even more playing time for Christian Wood, I would think.
Before we get into the main slate, I do want to mention this question that we got in our premium Slack account, which says, is there any way to control a position a player goes to, guard, forward, utility, when doing a lot of lineups on fantasy crunchers, so be able to late swap better?
Yeah, use if you look at Fantasy Cruncher, which I don't happen to have. There it is. Yeah, if you look at Fantasy Cruncher, for players with multi-position eligibility, under the position column, there's like a drop-down menu, and it'll by default have their multi-position eligibility. But if like they're power forward / center, and you just switch and click the power forward, they'll only go into forward spots.
Of course, if you do have a question and you are one of our premium members, you can do that in Slack. Just mention myself, and I'll see that question. We'll bring it up here in the show. Let's get right into the main slate. Up first, we've got Charlotte and Toronto. Toronto, a 7.5-point favorite in this one. Of course, you can check out the odds over at oddshopper.awesemo.com. The over-under number in this game, 218.5. I know Charlotte's just your favorite team to talk about.
Yeah, always. Gordon Hayward questionable for this one, missed the last game after being injured 2 games ago. If he's back, then the whole team kind of is overpriced, overpriced, I guess not the right word, especially with a 4-game slate. Like Hayward still has a high enough ceiling. So does LaMelo Ball to pay off their salaries. But this whole team basically is priced now closer to their ceiling than their median projection or definitely their floor. You had, LaMelo Ball's playing time sort of all over the place. Looking back at the game that he played without Hayward, he still played 26 minutes off the bench. It just kind of seems like no matter what happens, he's playing between 26 and 30 minutes. He's averaging like 1.3 fantasy points per minute, and he's always a triple-double threat. So that the potential for him to have those 50-plus fantasy point games is still there, but you're just absolutely paying for it at this point. Same really goes for Hayward, who on average, is around a 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy. You expect 34, 35 minutes at almost 8K. That it's tough for him to justify that salary, but he has a big enough role in the offense that he still can do it. Just nothing that really looks like a priority from Charlotte, though, at their pricing.
Yeah, I mean, one guy, I always look at Biyombo at the center position, just because the double threat is there every day.
Yeah, and his salary has come down. He was someone I actually mentioned last slate as not being really necessary on that particular slate, but he's averaging about 26 minutes per game as a starter this year. He's averaging about 0.9 fantasy points per minute. The problem is, like, at the center position, the opportunity cost is so high, but with this being a 4-game slate, not quite as high, I don't think. You do still have, one cheap center that you're basically locking in probably, or at least close to it, but not quite as much opportunity cost as normal. So, using him as a value is a decent idea. The problem is just that you're still talking about normally around 26 minutes of Bismack Biyombo. So he might give you a decent point per dollar score at 4K, but the chances of him having that, 30, 40 point game are still pretty low.
Looking at the other side here with the Raptors, Pascal Siakam, 8,500 on DK, Fred VanVleet, 8,000, Kyle Lowry, 7,700, and that price on Chris Boucher continues to skyrocket, now up to 6,900.
Yeah, I still like the salary on Boucher, especially in this spot, though. He's averaged over 1.3 DraftKings points per minute this year. And one of the big things with him is just kind of figuring out the matchup and if it's a spot where Nick Nurse is gonna lean on him heavily, or if he's more likely to give more minutes to Aaron Baines or Alex Len. In this case, Aaron Baines because Len is out. But we saw it last game where Baines started the first half, Boucher started the second half. That's been a trend that the Raptors have been using this year, and it's a Charlotte front court where Boucher should have no issue being on the floor. Bismack Biyombo is not a big center, and he's a low usage guy, so there's no problem with Boucher being out there against him. And Charlotte's backup center is PJ Washington, who is a power forward, basically like Boucher is. So there's no reason Boucher can't be on the floor. I expect him to play 28, 30 minutes again, and especially because he's power forward eligible, so he's not taking up that center spot. I think he's still a great player.
When you look at the top three for the Raptors, is there one of those three guys that you really don't really love them in this spot?
Not really. They all grade out pretty similarly to me. Like they're all players that produce between like 1.05 and 1.15 fantasy points per minute. They're all going to play like 35 to 37 minutes, assuming a competitive game. So it really, it comes down to pricing. Obviously, like looking at DraftKings pricing, Kyle Lowry is going to be easier to get into most lineups than Siakam, who's $800 more expensive. It also comes down, of course, to what position they play and kind of what you're looking for in your lineup. But yeah, it's kind of just they all project well. Obviously, all three of them probably aren't going to have a big game at the same time. So it just ends up being like, how much salary do I have? What position do I need? Because I don't think there's a big difference between any of the three.
I mean, you talk about the price points over on FanDuel with the Raptors. I mean, you're talking $1,500 difference between Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, and that's it from a ceiling perspective, it's tough to justify. From like an actual production standpoint, I think Siakam is the better fantasy producer, but that's not to say that Lowry can't have big games, just like he did the last time he faced Charlotte 2 days ago. So yeah, I think that like Siakam should be more expensive. If Siakam were the same price as Kyle Lowry, his ownership would be through the roof. But from an upside standpoint, it leaves Lowry a little bit underpriced.
Obviously, Boucher, you got to pay much more for him on FanDuel than you do on DraftKings. He's $8,100 on FanDuel.
Yeah, the price on FanDuel is definitely a little bit of sticker shock, and it at least introduces some risk. Like at $6,900 on DraftKings, Boucher can fail, but assuming he gets the minutes that we're expecting him to, it's pretty hard. Like he'd have to have one of his worst games of the season to really disappoint you. On FanDuel, you actually need him to have a pretty good game, even by his standards. But that being said, the power forward position still not the best. Like I think Boucher probably the second highest projected player at power forward. And once you get past Bam and John Collins and Boucher, you just drop off into some guys that are really, really unappealing. So if you are paying up a power forward, I think that Boucher is still one of the top options.
Any value plays on the Charlotte side in this one? I mean, like you look at PJ Washington 6,400, Graham 6,000, Miles Bridges 4,500. Any of those guys interest you?
Not really. Like PJ Washington, someone I've been interested in all year, and if you get to him in tournaments, I still think it's fine. But earlier this year, when he was like 5K or 5,200, he was priced basically for his downside and gave you like nothing but upside, because in the games where he's not in foul trouble and he's getting those backup center minutes, he's really, really productive. And we know he can play more than 30 minutes, but now he's kind of priced to play 33, 34 minutes. And if you do get foul trouble or you do get a little bit shorter rotation for whatever reason, then you're in trouble. So more of a tournament play. The same really goes for Rozier and Graham. Miles Bridges at 4,500 is inexpensive. His rebounding numbers are up this year as he's playing power forward against the second unit. Played 29 minutes and closed last game. If Hayward's out, I think Bridges is someone you could look to for value on the 4-game slate, but it's still not something I'd feel great about. And if Hayward's out, you got to start for Caleb Martin last time, who played 24 minutes. He's 3,500. Again, not a great value, but he is cheap on a 4-game slate.
And of course, as we lead up to lock, you got to pay attention to those ownership projections. If you want to get access to our ownership projections, you got to sign up right now for an Awesemo weekly pass for $29.95. Just go to awesemo.com/promos to sign up for that weekly pass. And if you just want a NBA weekly pass, you can get that for $16.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Right there, just go to the website. You can sign up and see all the packages that we do have. You see Jordan's got there right up on the screen of how you can sign up. And, of course, one of the great things that you have when you're Awesemo Plus member is you get access to our Slack channel which you can talk to all the guys here over at Awesemo.com. Let's move on to the next game, which is Philly and Memphis. The over-under in this one, 218.5. Which side do you want to start on this one? Do you want to start on the Philly or the Memphis side?
We start on the Philly side.
Obviously, Philly, they've been hit with COVID a little bit here. We know Seth Curry's out. And you look at, Joel Embiid listed as out. What's kind of your take on Philly here?
Well, you get more center value here. Obviously we have Enes Kanter in the last game we'll talk about, but you get Dwight Howard, you get Tony Bradley. And one thing that's nice is that because the center position isn't as deep on this slate, you can go to these guys with more confidence. Like Dwight Howard at 4,300 on DraftKings, Tony Bradley at 3K flat. If you're going to get like 24 minutes from Howard and around 20, 22 minutes from Bradley, they're both going to grade out as good point per dollar options. It's a matchup against Memphis where Jonas Valanciunas probably is going to play like 28 to 30 minutes. So you'll at least want Howard and or Bradley out there to deal with that. So I think it gives you value there at the center position, but then it also opens up usage, particularly Tobias Harris takes a step forward with Embiid out, but Seth Curry being out opens up more minutes for Shake Milton and Tyrese Maxey. Ben Simmons in position to have a better game than normal as well. So the combination of being down a body in Seth Curry plus Joel Embiid and then Embiid's usage being out, I think really opens up a lot of value from Philly.
Yeah, I had to laugh the other day. Ben Simmons driving to the lane, and his defender just basically stops, dares him to shoot a jumper, and he doesn't know what to do. He had no idea what to do. I was just like, oh, God, Ben Simmons. Oh, man. If you can learn just to hit a jumper, man, you could be really elite in this league. Yep. But Theodore over the YouTube chat brings up, he goes, anybody brave enough to hop on the Danny Green roller coaster?
He's just kind of expensive. He looks like the guy that I like the least out of the Philly, like main Philly guys. Like I'd rather look to Tyrese Maxey or Shake Milton at a similar price point just because they're better scorers. I think they're more likely to have those big games. Like the Sixers still aren't. They're shorthanded, but they're not in that situation like they were before, where Danny Green has to go play 40 minutes, or in that case 50 minutes with overtime. So he can certainly still have a good game. Memphis is a favorable matchup and all that, but I'd rather just have the ball handlers, the guys that are going to have the ball in their hands, in Maxey and Milton if I'm going that route.
Evan wants to know about how about playing two Philly centers together on DraftKings?
It's probably not ideal, but you can get away with it, I think, because for one, it's a 4-game slate, so there's just less opportunity cost in general. And then two, you don't have the, obviously you don't have Embiid, but you don't have Jokic, you don't have Drummond, you don't have those guys at the top to pay up for. So there is some merit, at least, to basically saying, okay, I'm paying $7,300 for close to 48 minutes of center between Howard and Bradley. On bigger slates, I don't really like that approach because there is a cost just to using that roster spot that, goes beyond how the player actually produces. But on the 4-game slate, that cost is a lot lower. So I think that it is at least a decent strategy as long as it's getting you upside somewhere else in your lineup.
On the Memphis side of the equation, I guess, because they did not play last night because their game was canceled, there was a potential that John Morant was going to play. So what, obviously this is something we got to pay attention to as we get, closer to lock, and the news guy will help us out there, on social media and also in our premium Slack account. But how are you kind of evaluating what to do here with the Grizzlies?
So my guess, and hopefully we'll get this news before lock since this game tips 30 minutes later, but my guess is that Morant returns tonight. They had said he was questionable last night, but the beat writers were basically saying that their guess was he was only going to play one half of the back-to-back, which would make sense. And it also was going to be a 3 and 4 with them playing on Monday also. So the schedule concerns kind of took care of themselves, and Morant obviously didn't play last night. My guess is he comes back tonight, but we'll obviously get confirmation later. If he does come back, we'll have to keep an eye and see what sort of minutes restriction he's going to be on, because he is pretty inexpensive. If we get word that he can play 30, 32 minutes, at the very least, he gives you a pretty nice ceiling at 7,600 on DraftKings. It would still be tough to trust him because you are still losing a few minutes off of what you would like, but he's good enough that he can pay off that salary if he's going to get at least 30 minutes. Beyond that, though, even if he doesn't return, I don't really love Memphis because they are priced up from him being out. But if he does come back, it makes it really tough to get to too much here. Like, I think Jonas Valanciunas is still a good option because he produces with or without Morant. His playing time's been trending up a bit. Gorgie Jang's been removed from the rotation, and Xavier Tillman's become the backup center. It seems like that has given a couple of minutes back to Valanciunas that Jang was stealing. And Valanciunas is just a really good producer. Now you have him going up against Dwight Howard and Tony Bradley instead of Joel Embiid. Valanciunas is someone that can pull Dwight Howard away from the basket, doesn't need to score at the rim. I think he can make life pretty difficult for Howard. So I do like Valanciunas with or without Morant. Brandon Clark, if he's still priced down on FanDuel, which I'm not sure if he is. He's 5,900 on FanDuel for Clark, averaging about 30 minutes a game since he joined the starting lineup. Still a decent value there. But overall, I think for Memphis, my interest is mostly in Valanciunas and then DraftKings, specifically John Morant, if he's going to play more than 30 minutes.
If John Morant does play, how's that kind of affect what you're doing with the guards and small forward situation? A guy like Kyle Anderson, Dylan Brooks, Tyus Jones. How's that affect your shares of if Morant does play?
I think it makes it it makes all of those guys less appealing, at least to some extent, because Dylan Brooks is someone that we typically have some interest in from a DFS standpoint, just because he'll go out there and shoot. He has about a 29% usage rate in the games without Morant, but Morant obviously takes usage away from him. We haven't seen Memphis running really tight rotations. Like, the minutes haven't really been where we want them to be for these guys. You haven't been getting 36 plus minutes from, Brooks anyway. And then Morant being back doesn't make me think that the playing time goes up for guys like Brooks. So it makes it really tough to get the Brooks. It takes some value away from Kyle Anderson as well. Maybe Anderson still runs with the second unit, which is where some of his value comes from, but you're going to get the decrease in usage with Morant being back. You've already gotten a decrease in rebounding with Brandon Clark joining the starting lineup and pushing Kyle Anderson up to the 3. And then if Anderson doesn't run point with the second unit anymore, because that's going to be Tyus Jones now, then you're losing the assist opportunities from Anderson as well. And he's basically priced to where you need all of those things. So Morant coming back would just kind of knock down rates across the board for Kyle Anderson, I think.
We'll move on to the next game, a game that's already got some news on it, and that is the Detroit and Miami game. News got over in our premium Slack, mentioned a tweet from one of the beat writers where Killian Hayes is out for the Pistons. The Heat are without Butler, Bradley, and Leonard, and 8 Heat players are listed as questionable.
Yeah, so kind of a similar situation to what we had with the Celtics last night, just with way more players involved. We had the Celtics up until around 5 p.m. yesterday had 4 of their guys questionable in health and safety protocols. Same thing with Miami here. Bam Adebayo, Goran Dragic, Mo Harkless, Udonis Haslem, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, KZ Okpala, and are all questionable with health and safety protocols. Tyler Hero is questionable with back spasms. The rest are questionable with health and safety protocols. And then Gabe Vincent is questionable with right knee soreness. So I don't even really know how to talk about this team right now, because I have absolutely no idea who's going to be playing, who's going to be available. Certainly the potential for Miami to be really shorthanded here. I think there's also the potential for this game to just get canceled possibly. So we'll have to, kind of just wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, that's kind of the, we talked about a little earlier how you have to use late swap and when, we do get to lock of setting yourself up where you do have some flexibility in your roster. I mean, when I was putting my sheet together of the salaries, the first thing that stuck out to me on the Detroit side is when you're talking about Jeremy Grant is the most expensive player on your team, probably not a good thing.
Yeah, I've actually been really surprised with his production this year. My guess coming into the season was that you were going to get peripherals from Grant, and he was going to always have a really high ceiling because he's going to get a lot of usage on this team, but he's not really like a number one scorer type guy. So I thought he would be really inefficient and inconsistent. It's kind of been the opposite this year. The peripherals haven't been there. The usage has been there, but he's actually been pretty consistent as a scorer. It's just that he's become scoring dependent, which is like the exact opposite of what we had in Denver. Leads the team, second to Derrick Rose with a 26.8% usage rate, but sub 10% assist percentage, sub 10% rebounding percentage, still averaging 1.09 DraftKings points per minute this year, which obviously is great. The salaries come up. The matchup is possibly not great. We don't really know who he's going against. He might just be going against backups on Miami, in which case it would be better. But The salary did come down a little bit on DraftKings. He was, I believe, 7,900 last game, 7,400 today. On the 4-game slate, I don't mind getting the Jeremy Grant, especially because he's small forward eligible. But the thing that keeps him from being a priority, I think, is that he's similarly priced to Tobias Harris going up against Memphis without Joel Embiid.
You look at Blake Griffin, he's 6,100 on both slates. And if you look at his past couple of games since coming back, playing 26 minutes, 40 minutes, 33 minutes, 32 minutes. The best game that he had was against the Sun, where he got 16 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. I feel like I've been burned more often than not with Blake Griffin, but the price point is kind of intriguing to me.
Yeah, it's decent. The issue I have, like the minutes have been fine in competitive games. You're typically getting 32, 33 minutes. It's just that the usage is down. The numbers across the board basically are down. He does have a 21% assist percentage, which is good, but he's only averaged 0.93 DraftKings points per minute this year. We haven't seen him playing, as aggressively in the paint, and that contributes, I think, to the 20% usage rate. He did have quotes recently about needing to, needing to be more aggressive in the paint and stuff. So maybe we'll see that going forward. But like what sticks out to me is the best game we had this season from Blake Griffin was the game against Cleveland, where he knocked down like 8 3-pointers. And I think he had 2 points that didn't come off of threes. That's just not the Blake Griffin that used to be really productive for DFS. That's more of someone that is going to give you a lot of mediocre games, and then occasionally will get hot shooting and give you a big game for his salary. So it's really tough, I think, to rely on him at this price point, especially because he does just kind of fall into that middle, like a weird middle ground where you can spend a little bit more money and get a higher ceiling from a Jeremy Grant or from a Tobias Harris at power forward, or you can save money and you're going to have these good value plays, particularly at the center position. So it's just kind of an awkward price point on Griffin, I think.
And like what you mentioned with Miami, it's just so hard to evaluate these salaries today because who's going to play? So we, what happens with Tyler Hero, but then when you start kind of looking down, Duncan Robinson, who is going to be in the lineup? And look, and the reality is, if this game does happen.
Right. The thing that, I don't know how the NBA will handle the fact. So the thing that makes it different than the previous games where all these guys missed with, health and safety protocols, but Miami had 8 players, is now you have Hero and Vincent both questionable with injuries. I don't know sort of what the league's going to do there. Like, are they going to force them to dress Tyler Hero and just not play him like they did with Philadelphia with Mike Scott, or what they're going to do? But the thing that I would lean toward, just kind of as a general rule, is whoever's handling the ball for Miami is going to look pretty good. If they are shorthanded, whether that's Tyler Hero, if he's in, Gabe Vincent, if he's in, if they're both out and this game somehow plays, which I don't know how it can, but I guess if the other guys come back and they're out. But like Max Struss is someone that's been coming off the bench, played 28 minutes in the blowout last game, can handle the ball. Lean towards the guys that are going to have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, that's something to pay attention to. Of course, when you're looking for that late breaking news, you got to follow us on Twitter at Awesemo NBA. And you got to check out our man, News Guy. He's right now in the YouTube chat, always in the premium Slack account, throwing up the latest news as well. Of course, you can follow him at News, NEWZGOD_DFS on Twitter when you need all that late breaking news. So be sure to give all of us a follow on social media for all that NBA news that you do need. And by the way, to Tilt Chamberlain, that picture you just put up in Slack is just awesome, as it is Kyrie, Durant, and Harden, and it says a live look at Brooklyn in a close game as they're all trying to steal the ball from each other.
Yeah, that's good.
Amazing photo. Whoever created that photo, yeah, you're pretty good at Photoshop there. Now, our final game of the night is Atlanta and Portland. Over under this game, -235. Obviously, there could be a ton of scoring to go on both sides of this one. I know someone in the chat a little earlier, not exactly on the Trae Young bandwagon anymore after not getting the points they want. But let's start on the Hawk side of this one. Trae Young, 8,900 on DK. John Collins, 7,100. Clint Capella, 6,700. DeAndre Hunter, 6,200.
Yeah, I mean, Portland's just been one of the most favorable matchups in the league this year. I think it's a great bounce back spot for Trae Young. He had a couple tough matchups against the good Charlotte defense that's been good this year. Then last night he faced Utah, which again, top third of the league as far as defensive efficiency this year. Now you get Portland, who's one of the faster teams and one of the least efficient defenses. we know Trae Young is gonna be a high usage guy. Typically, he's also going to pick up a ton of assists. It's just been a really tough stretch. You had a Philadelphia game mixed in there as well against the second unit where he did really, really well. But other than that, two Charlotte games and a Utah game where he's been disappointing. Portland is a lot closer to that Philadelphia backup squad than it is to Utah or to Charlotte. So I think it's a good spot to go back to Young. He's also not priced up here. That's something that I think is really important. Like if he had played well last night in the Charlotte games, you're probably talking about getting like a $9,800 Trae Young going against Portland or something like that. But because he played poorly, his salary came down a ton for yesterday. And then you got a little bit of a bump back for this matchup against Portland, but he's still at one of the cheapest price points that you're going to find Trae Young at. So I think that this is a really good spot for him to come back. He looks really, really good. The other two main pieces from Atlanta, obviously being John Collins and Clint Capella, I think they both look good here as well. You have Yusuf Nurkic out for Portland, which should bump Enes Kanter to the starting lineup and then give you either Harry Giles or Carmelo Anthony as the backup center. I think that Collins should be able to be on the floor against either of those guys, should get those backup center minutes. Looking at what Atlanta did yesterday, because they did get Okongwu back, he played 14 minutes off the bench, mostly in garbage time. He did get most of the backup center minutes, so that hurts Collins a little bit. I'm not sure what their plan is for him today. But if he were to be ruled out on the second half of the back-to-back, it would make Collins look better as well. Clint Capella, I think, is really interesting because Alex and I talked about it yesterday that 2 games ago, he played like 27 minutes in a blowout, but he played 17 first half minutes. His rotation had him on pace to play 33 or 34 minutes if the game didn't blow out. The same thing happened yesterday. Capella finished with 27.3 minutes, but he missed his final rotation in the fourth quarter. He played a lot in the first half. I think that you're potentially looking at 32, 33 minutes from Capella against a weak Portland front court. So Trae Young and Capella would be my priorities here. John Collins is fine. Like him, where I can get to him. And then looking to a $4,600 Cam Reddish in a good matchup here. Obviously not the most exciting player, but you should get 30 plus minutes from him, assuming he's going to stay in the starting lineup and his salaries come down a bit despite the good matchup.
Looking at the Portland side of the equation here, I think the thing that really jumps out to me is the difference in price points on CJ McCollum on DraftKings as opposed FanDuel. He's $9,200, which is only $100 less than Dame, but on the other side, he's $8,300 on DK, where Dame is $9,200.
Yeah, it's weird seeing them priced that close together, and I think that you still give the edge to Lillard. But so far this year, they have produced at about the same rate, and I do think that the way Portland's running their rotation benefits McCollum in particular because Terry Stotts is staggering their minutes, which is something that he hasn't always done in the past. But typically when they play together, you're going to get Lillard dominating touches, whereas when the minutes are staggered, you're getting McCollum running the offense more often. McCollum, I'm looking at the rotation from last game where they I guess they still staggered. They both just played a ton of minutes. But last game, they didn't do it fully like they had in the past. So that's a little bit concerning, but that's only one game. So I'm assuming that they'll continue doing it. If they were to stop doing it, McCollum is going to be overpriced basically immediately. But assuming they keep doing so, I think that there's still value on McCollum's salary, at least from an upside standpoint. 8,300 on DraftKings, I think looks really good. But Lillard is, I think, pretty clearly underpriced, given that we should still expect him to end up being the number one scoring option here like he has every other year.
And now with Nurkic out with the hand injury and his cancer, how are you kind of projecting him in terms of minutes?
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of tough because Portland has shown the willingness to go small. 2 games ago, I think it was, when Nurkic, or 3 games ago, I guess, when Nurkic left in the first quarter, you got Cantor starting in the second half, but he only played 5 or 6 minutes. Portland closed with Carmelo Anthony in a small ball unit. I don't think that's as likely against Atlanta because I assume that Clint Capella is going to be in the closing lineup for Atlanta. So I think that you probably get, 26 plus minutes from Cantor, which if that's the case is going to be really appealing. He's, a 1.2 plus fantasy point per minute guy, and he's really cheap. So I think he looks good there. You also could, if you don't want to go that route, you could go to, his cheap backup, Harry Giles, who I am not really confident in his minutes, but probably gets you mid-teens. If Cantor were to get in foul trouble, probably picks up a little bit more and is typically a productive player. So, tournaments only there, but, a way that you could kind of leverage against Cantor's ownership. But I do think against Atlanta, this is probably a spot where you get a little bit more and it's Cantor. The one thing that I guess would concern me though is in the past, Cantor's biggest defensive liability has been defending pick and roll. Trae Young's one of the highest frequency pick and roll guards in the league. There is the potential that Cantor just gets abused here and kind of Terry Stotts has to adjust and do something else.
Now, if you do have any questions before we get out of here on this edition of the Strategy Show, line those up right now in our premium Slack account or right here on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. We got shows for you all day long. Coming up next will be the UFC Live Before Lock show. Then following that, later this afternoon, we'll get you ready for all the NFL playoff action. And, of course, NBA Live Before Lock. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. each time. Of course, if you ever miss one of our shows, they are all part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. Go to awesemo.com/podcast so you can get the links to where your favorite podcast is at. And be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review with your Twitter username or Awesemo username for your chance to win a free week of Awesemo Plus. As we're giving away a free Awesemo Plus pass every week to the person who submits the best review. Good luck. And go to awesemo.com/podcast. Carl asked the question of, can you stack the Raptors in a GPP? I mean, it's only a 4-game slate right now. Could be 3. So
yeah, sure. I mean, it's not like an optimal build, I don't think, because you're going to be foregoing some of the Sixers guys or some of the guys from the Atlanta-Portland game. But 4-game slate, the opportunity cost is lower. It might be a 3-game slate. I would probably try and run it back with some Charlotte guys and just hope you get overtime or something. But it's fine.
I kind of feel like if I'm going to stack a team, I'm looking at that last game of the night with the Hawks and the Blazers.
Yeah, I think that's clearly the game that you're going to prioritize. I would say the Philly game, but I don't really know who you're running it back with from the Memphis side. But yeah, I mean, Atlanta and Portland is the game where you just have a ton of good plays on both sides. And it's the game that I think is the most appealing to stack. You'll definitely get lower ownership on that Toronto Charlotte one. Like if you're game stacking the game and basically just hoping you get lucky and it goes to overtime or, outscores its total by 20 points or something, you're going to get a lot fewer people doing that on the Charlotte game than you are on the Atlanta game.
Nick asking about Tyler Hero. We talked about that a little bit. When it comes to the Heat, everyone's pretty much questionable. So it's just going to be something that you're going to have to pay attention to as the day goes on to see whether that game or not is going to actually play. I mean, that's really the big thing with the Heat. It's tough to analyze the Heat as we do this show here at 10:37 East Coast time.
Yeah, I mean, with Hero, he's at a price point where basically – if he's in, because he's questionable with, left last game early with back spasms, he's questionable for today. If Hero is in and the guys that are in health and safety protocols are out, so you're getting the same basically 8 guys that you had before, then Hero's still a really good play at 7,200 because he's going to play a ton of minutes and he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. If Hero's in and all the health and safety guys are back, then he's competing with Bam Adebayo for touches, both as a scorer and as a playmaker. He doesn't have to play as many minutes because you have Goran Dragic back. You have Kendrick Nunn that can join the rotation. You have, not a fully healthy team because like Butler would still be out, but you have a lot more bodies and he's priced basically to be playing 36 minutes and dominating usage. So he'd be overpriced. If he's out, obviously you don't play him. So it's really just dependent on who else is there.
James asking for our thoughts on Reggie Perry, the backup center there in Brooklyn. On the early slate, he obviously got a big run the other night, had not gotten a run this season, but because of the lack of bodies that Brooklyn had the other day, he's very cheap. I mean, if you want to go that way, 3,000 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. Yeah,
I mean, on the 2-gamer, if Brooklyn is, on the 2-gamer, it's fine. If I don't even know if they're running a 6-game slate, but if you're comparing it to the 4-game slate, like you have Tony Bradley, you have Howard, you have all these cheap centers, but on the 2-game slate, I don't expect 22 minutes from Perry again. He picked up about 3 minutes of garbage time run in that game, but he still was playing backup center. He still should get 17, 18 minutes, I would think.
Yeah, Tony Bradley is actually a name someone actually had brought up in chat about your take on him.
He's I think plays 20 to 22 minutes because I don't think that Philadelphia is going to look to run Dwight Howard into the ground. They certainly could, but my guess is that you get some sort of like 24 to 28 minutes for Howard, 20 to 24 minutes, some kind of split like that between Howard and Bradley.
Look, I just want to see Dwight run the point like they talked about the other day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they played him alongside Joel Embiid the other day. That was something I never thought would happen.
Yeah, it's but I mean, look, this is why you got to follow us on social media. You got to follow News God as he gets you for all these. I mean, obviously, I think the big one today is going to be what happens with the Heat in terms of that one. But look, you got to pay his ownership projections, and I'll be looking at that final game of the night. Especially, I think Trae Young is going to be the guy that I'm really going to be paying attention to see maybe, is he overowned or maybe not owned enough.
Yeah. And one other point with Dwight Howard, he did 3 games ago against Atlanta play 35 minutes in that game where the Sixers were really shorthanded. So he at least did it. The coaching staff let him play 35 minutes. He physically was able to do it. Other than that, he hasn't played more than 24 minutes in a game this year. So again, like my expectation is that you're going to get mid to upper 20s from Howard with the rest going to Bradley. You certainly could just have Doc Rivers say, oh yeah, you're the starting center today, go play 36. I don't think that's the most likely case.
Yeah, but we'll see how this one goes along. Of course, NBA Live Before Lock will be today, 6:30 p.m. each time, but we got a full slate of shows coming for you here today. Of course, be sure to give all of us a follow on Twitter. Adam's at ShipMyMoney DFS. I am at Jason_Floyd. And, follow Adam on Twitter. You might get little snarky comments every once in a while from Adam on Twitter. By the way, I did see someone did create another profile of you on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that. Had like a million DMs about it when I got off the deeper dive yesterday. So glad to have finally made it, and someone made an account mimicking mine.
You should feel good about yourself then. I mean,
Yeah.
someone has made a fake account of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get jealous of like the Awesemo, McLovin types that, everyone tries to make Twitter accounts to sell lineups as them. So glad to have finally joined that group.
And of course, keep it locked here all day long. Come here about 20 minutes from now will be UFC Live Before Lock. So that's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com.